Happiness is a place. Hidden in the Himalayan mountain range between China and India is the small country of Bhutan, about a fourth of the size of the state of Georgia. Its mountainous landscape is some of the most beautiful in the world. Its isolationist policies make it a popular tourist destination. Land is sanctioned off and not allowed to be used for agriculture, which keeps the landscape unspoiled from outsider influence. It's one of the world's very few carbon-negative countries. Bhutan also uses a unique system called Gross National Happiness, or GNH, that measures the happiness of its citizens. Every program and decision in the country is made with the happiness of the citizens at the forefront. Bhutan's legal code in 1629 stated that if the government cannot create happiness for its people, then there is no purpose for government to exist. Happiness was expected to be given to every living being, an idea that has prevailed in Bhutan. This corresponded with the ideas of Buddhism that are also so prevalent in the country. The concept of GNH was introduced in the early 1970s by the fourth king of Bhutan. He was the one to originally claim that GNH should be considered alongside GDP. He saw GNH as an indicator of the progressions Bhutan was making as a country. He also believed strongly in the importance of the people in making decisions in Bhutan. Bhutan later adopted a democratic government in 2008. GNH became more quantifiable, and Bhutan claims this is because of the influence of other countries as it was placed on a worldwide scale. Today, Bhutan describes GNH as a multidimensional development approach seeking to achieve a harmonious balance between material well-being and the spiritual, emotional, and cultural needs of a society. The balance refers to harmony between the body and the mind. In comparison to the largely GDP-driven capitalistic society of the US, Bhutan has taken a much different approach. Even with other South Asian countries, prioritizing happiness to the degree that Bhutan does is unusual. Bhutan's unique national policy has encouraged national conversation. At the UN, Bhutan claimed that happiness should have a greater role in the developmental policies of other countries. It encouraged member nations to consider the happiness of their citizens when making policy decisions. A resolution at the UN agreed with Bhutan's position, saying that unsustainable patterns of consumption don't accurately reflect a nation's productivity. Bhutan's status as a carbon-neutral country is also important to note on a global scale. The UN has prioritized carbon emissions and climate change as one of the key issues facing the world today. Bhutan is an example to the rest of the world because of its net negative carbon emissions.
Bhutan deemed that GDP and other existing metrics were inappropriate as means of self-evaluation. The country sought to define what societal progress meant for itself and created GNH in the 1970s. GNH is influenced by the tenets of Buddhism, which embraces harmony and compassion. It attempts to achieve this by trying to uphold what are referred to as the four pillars of GNH, which are sustainable economic development, preservation of culture and tradition, conservation of the environment, and good governance.
GNH works using census data that is synthesized by an algorithm to evaluate the population performance across 124 variables associated with the four pillars. Groups of people are placed into three cutoff tiers at 50%, 66%, and 77% happy, with 66% happiness being considered sufficiently happy. Situations below 50% are considered problematic, and the algorithm is capable of identifying groups and demographics that score below 50%, as well as the variables contributing to the insufficiency. In theory, this allows the government to efficiently identify struggling communities to provide swift solutions. The data from 2003 shown here presents some interesting findings. For instance, cultural and religious participation rank among the strongest factors to happiness, while income ranked among the weakest.
For only 38,394 square kilometers, slightly smaller than the state of Kentucky, Bhutan's environment is one of the best protected natural ecosystems in the world. In fact, Bhutan's ecosystem falls under one of the most biodiverse systems. To preserve this delicate and unique environment, Bhutan has constitutional decrees focused on the preservation of these habitats. Now, what connects Bhutan's environmental policies to its international presence is how prominent Bhutan's natural reserves are in the global stage. Bhutan's forests are sprawling with four major river systems. These rivers are the primary source of water for an estimated one-fifth of the world's population. Additionally, Bhutan's extensive forestry also contributes to the absorption of carbon dioxide, helping reduce emissions in the Himalayas.
Bhutan's environment is prone to harsh weathering such as landslides, forest fires, earthquakes, and glacier floodings. This varied weather is a result of Bhutan's location right at the border of the different climates of North and South Asia, the first experiencing more tropical circulation, while the latter is characterized through monsoon seasons. Since Bhutan is located in such a volatile environment, the effects of climate change have already started becoming apparent. Certain regions have been recorded to have an average of 0.74 degrees Celsius rise in temperatures, and glacier lake outburst floods are becoming more prominent. These specific floods cause a rise in water levels in rivers surrounding the Himalayas, submerging villages and cultivated land. The increase of extreme weather is a significant factor to consider when it comes to Bhutan's agricultural sector. About 57% of Bhutan citizens rely on agriculture as a source of income, so the changing state of the environment is of increasing concern. Interviews with elderly farmers in the Bumthang district of Bhutan provide evidence of how climate change has affected its farming land and crop yield, especially in the context of their enduring practice of subsistence farming. Each of the 5 farmers interviewed have observed warming temperatures and an increase of unpredictable precipitation over the many years they have been providing for their families. One states that though it is nice they get a chance to grow crops that thrive in warmer climates, such as chilies, they're afraid of just how much hotter it might get in the future. Furthermore, crop yields have been predicted to decrease from 1% to as much as 19%. Plants like rice that occupy 28% of the 3% of Bhutan's cultivatable land are especially susceptible to climate change, which can be worrisome when it is the main grain of Bhutanese families. Thus, maintaining Bhutan's goal of being carbon neutral or even negative is important to its government, which is why it plays a big part of the country's GNH. When the environment is in good condition, people will be able to grow crops, remain healthy, and provide for their family.
This contrast between Bhutan's GNH policy and the traditional measurement of growth through gross domestic product is another factor that pushes Bhutan's international prominence. Huge infrastructure cities such as Shanghai and LA produce mass amounts of emissions without reservation, driven by the measure of production. They have disregarded the impact these actions have on the rate of climate change. As you can see in this image, this is a visual of the carbon footprint of each country. And if you look closer to the left of China, Bhutan's footprint is just a tiny pixel. In an interview concerning the impact of climate change on Bhutan's environment, Bhutan's Secretary of the National Environment Commission states that our gross national product may not look entirely impressive when placed in the same league with countries of the West, but Bhutan considers ecosystem services and immense biodiversity stored in these forests to the utmost importance. This difference in priorities has what set Bhutan up to be one of the world's leading influences in sustainability and environment preservation.
Although Bhutan is one of the world's least developed countries, they have basically eliminated extreme poverty, provided access to healthcare and education, and have a youth national literacy rate of 93%. This has helped Bhutan's economy grow at a considerable rate. Bhutan's economic development is guided by the philosophy of gross national happiness and its 4 pillars, which are sustainable economic development, preservation of culture and tradition, conservation of the environment, and good governance. Bhutan's economic development policy wishes to strengthen and reform the 5 jewels of Bhutan's economy. These 5 jewels are hydropower, agriculture, cottage/small industries, mining, and tourism. Bhutan's economic goals are to reach self-reliance and sustain full employment while remaining carbon negative.
Ecotourism has long been promoted in Bhutan as an avenue for growth that is in line with GNH. The country aims for high-yield, low-impact tourism. On paper, developing ecotourism would provide much-needed income for rural communities, which make up roughly 69% of the population, while leaving the culture and environment relatively untouched. Improving the socioeconomic standing of this demographic would greatly increase the country's GNH, yet little progress has been made due to the contradictory inner workings of GNH. The green line on the chart shown here represents the number of ecotourists entering the country every year. And as you can see, there's been little growth despite the government determining that ecotourism is necessary for GNH growth. Anyways, to improve Bhutan's economic sector, the Bhutanese government implemented a 200 to 250 per day spending quota for tourists. It is difficult for prospective ecotourists to spend a day traveling from Bhutan's only airport in Paro, shown with the red star here, to a remote ecotourism destination and also spend $200 in the same day. Furthermore, there is a severe lack of hotels and restaurants in rural Bhutan as a consequence of the government's overzealous environmental policies. This lack of infrastructure is further driven by the fact that 60% of tourists are elderly people that can afford the high spending quota, because these people prefer to stay within the country's major cities to witness the festivals and thus contribute nothing to the rural communities. A 2003 study found that the nearly 10 million USD made by tourism went mostly to cities and the government. More recent studies from 2019 have shown that development of ecotourism has not panned out. Economic security has come at the cost of social cohesion. One informant reported that if labor were needed within the recently constructed homestay in his village, the owner would only hire within their family, even if more capable workers were available. Tourists end up only eating and sleeping within the homestay, and the community makes no money from it. Frustrated villagers have occasionally vandalized these homestays or torn down signs.
G&H is a system that has shaped Bhutan, one that will continue to do so for many years to come. Bhutan is seen as a model country that is tackling its socio-economic goals while remaining carbon neutral. While other countries have a higher priority on their overall production, G&H continues to push the focus to the citizens of Bhutan. However, looking more in depth into G&H shows some of its complications. Compromises have to be made in many cases, such as loss in agricultural revenue for nearly 70% of the population with adoption of environmental policies. G&H has a heavy impact on both the environment and economy of Bhutan that can't simply be explained as good or bad.